Today we're going to talk about a week's worth of bad news for Donald Trump, where he got gut punched by 3 separate legal decisions and announcements, and I interview the governor of New York, Kathy Hochul, about the huge role that New York played in redistricting, some major moves on mask mandates, and what's being done to make sure that the environment that Andrew Cuomo created doesn't return. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen, and you're listening to No Lie. So it's not often that I focus on Trump on this podcast, and that's very much on purpose. But I think enough has happened this past week on the Donald Trump front that it warrants some attention. And I'm not coming out and saying that Donald Trump is done for, that the walls are finally closing in. Just got some Robert Mueller vibes there. But I will say that he had a really bad week, and it doesn't exactly portend anything positive for him. First, a judge ruled that Trump, Ivanka, and Don Jr. would have to sit for questioning under oath as part of the New York Attorney General's investigation into the Trump Org's business practices. Specifically that he used bogus financial statements to inflate the value of his assets, and that would help him secure better loans. The Trump team tried to claim that the AG, who is Letitia James, was too politically biased against him to allow the interview to go forward, which the judge basically laughed out of the courtroom. He said that Letitia James had uncovered, quote, copious evidence of possible financial fraud. And granted, that's not to say that Trump and his kids can't just show up and plead the fifth. They can, they probably will, but, well, here's a clip that I'll play for no reason at all.
Here's people taking the Fifth Amendment. 4 people plus the guy who illegally did the server. You know, he put in the illegal server. So there are 5 people taking the Fifth Amendment, like you see on the mob, right? You see the mob takes the Fifth. If you're innocent, why are you taking the Fifth Amendment?
So yeah, I have a feeling that clip will pop up again. And by the way, just remember what Jamie Raskin said just a few weeks ago during an interview with me on exactly the issue of Trump testifying.
He will either get up there and tell the truth and completely convict himself of being at the center of this attack on American democracy, this attempt to overthrow the 2020 election and coerce Mike Pence into unilaterally rejecting electoral college votes, or he'll lie, he'll commit perjury.
So if you're looking for a reason why Trump will likely plead the fifth, it's probably because, on one hand, if he talks, he'll be incapable of not lying, and if by some miracle he doesn't lie, well, the truth isn't exactly going to help him either. Turns out there's not a ton of great options when your only move is to commit crimes. Next, a federal judge in Washington ruled that 3 civil suits against Trump regarding January 6th could move forward. The lawsuits were brought forward by Capitol Police officers and members of Congress who served on January 6th and focused on the role that he played in instigating the insurrection. Trump's lawyers had been arguing that he couldn't be sued because he was acting in his official capacity as president when he addressed the crowd before the insurrection took place on January 6th. And the judge rightfully shot that down because it turns out that inciting a mob to storm the Capitol doesn't actually fall under the umbrella of a president's official responsibilities. And if Trump ultimately was found liable in any of these cases, he'd be on the hook to pay financial damages. And finally, the kicker here, the National Archives confirmed that Trump took classified documents with him to Mar-a-Lago. That's right, Donald Trump, who couched his entire campaign in 2016 on how much of a crook Hillary Clinton was because of how her mishandling of classified information put all of our lives at risk, that guy boxed up a bunch of classified national security information and took it with him to his golf course in Florida. Like the RNC issued a resolution back then condemning Clinton for violating regulations on protecting sensitive material and encouraged the Justice Department and the State Department to investigate her. And not just the RNC. Seriously, if I were to list out all of the officials on the right who castigated Hillary Clinton for doing the thing that Trump just got caught doing, I would name every single Republican. This would be the longest episode ever recorded. So I'll spare you the laundry list, but I will say that if they thought that mishandling classified information was bad enough that they should open a criminal investigation into Hillary Clinton, then surely they'd abide by the same precedent now. Surely they wouldn't want us thinking that the attacks on Hillary weren't actually because of her actions, but rather just because she was some potent target for them. Surely. And look, clearly the right is radio silent on this right now because it was never actually about the crime. It was always about attacking Hillary. Trump could literally run a child sex trafficking ring in the basement of a pizza place and still the Republican Party wouldn't utter a word about it. But the point is that they did make a big stink about it with Hillary, and she did get investigated. And so, look, that is exactly what the DOJ should do here. You don't get to just get away with crimes because you do a lot of them or because you do them in broad daylight. So open an investigation, because it is bad enough that Republicans and conservatives in the media somehow convinced the entire country that Hillary using a private email server was the greatest national security scandal in the history of this country. But even worse would be not investigating an actual crime that Republicans have already set the precedent for investigating. That would be ridiculous. If there's one thing that Republicans have shoved down our throats as being prosecutable, it's this. So okay, prosecute it then. The simple fact is that if the government wants to restore any semblance of trust in our institutions, then they have to show that those institutions aren't incapable of actually delivering some modicum of accountability. They can't only work against the powerless. In fact, there's no better way to undermine trust in our institutions than having a system that does bring the hammer down on regular people while letting the rich and powerful, people like Donald Trump, skate by. We love to call ourselves a nation of laws. It is now or never to show whether those laws actually apply to everyone. To check out my interview with the governor of New York, Kathy Hochul, where we discuss the huge role that New York played in redistricting, some big moves on mask mandates in that state, and what's being done to make sure that the environment that Andrew Cuomo created doesn't return, click the thumbnail right here on the screen or check out the interviews playlist on my YouTube channel.